Good evening, everyone. This is Wednesday evening, a very cold night in Sheffield. I just hope that well, and also a good evening to everybody who might be watching this not live but later on. Welcome to part 3 of United Against Suicide, part of the Sheffield United Community Foundation Trust. I've been asked to do 4 sessions on suicide prevention. This is session number 3, supporting a friend who's lost a loved one through suicide. I'm going to recap before or as I continue. Really good to see everyone here, whether live or later on watching the replay. And certainly thank you very much for those who've taken the time out just to watch for a few minutes. Won't be long, about 20-25 minutes, but it's really good to get some information because you never know, you might have to be a real support to a friend, and it's really good if you've got some knowledge. So we looked at, I'll just recap very, very quickly. We looked at the first week, some of the signs and symptoms. But as we do that, I'd just like to ask us 3 questions in terms of the learning to take away the best that we can from this particular video and the other 2 videos. Is why should I use this? How can I use this? When will I use this? In terms of the information, and taking notes is really important, and looking at them so if anything should happen, one, you know where your notes are and you know exactly what to do. So the first week we looked at the whole thing about suicide being decriminalised in 1961, but there's a legacy in our language in terms of committing suicide. Suicide was no longer a crime from 1961, but that the language is still there in our kind of psyche. So we should say things like somebody has died by suicide, taken their lives by suicide, or killed themselves, or completed suicide. If somebody attempted to take their own life and failed, you can say something like they failed their suicide attempt. So the word commit, if we try not to use that, that's really, really helpful. So we looked at some of the signs and symptoms, we looked at some of the causes. Could be a relationship and a breakup, separation and divorce, people losing their jobs, and certainly with men in particular, the whole thing around kudos and status, and some of the signs and symptoms, people saying, my family would be better off without me, my friends would be better off without me. These can be some of the signs and symptoms of somebody contemplating taking their own life. We looked last week at somebody who might be feeling suicidal and some of the things that we'd kind of need to look out for. One of the things that it may feel really hard to say, but one of the things that's not helpful is if you suspect, you don't say to somebody, are you thinking of doing something daft? Or are you thinking of doing something silly? Or are you thinking of doing something, daft or silly or stupid? Ask the question, are you planning to take your own life? And you might think, oh gosh, I can't say that. But what that does, it brings the unspeakable into the space where they can talk about it. That's really important. So then you ask the questions, how are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? What plans have you made? So what it does, it normalizes it. Now this is the thing. Research has shown that if you have those conversations, people feel really relieved because they've been carrying this stuff for a long time and they don't know who to talk to about it. So actually putting the cards on the table and asking those questions can be really helpful for them. So that's some of the how we support somebody who's feeling suicidal. I put some signposts in the chat box afterwards. If you're watching live and you want to ask a question, please do. I'll check before I disappear. If I can answer the question there, then I will do. If not, I'll send you a message. Today, we're now looking at this whole thing around how do you support a friend or a family who's lost a loved one through suicide. Really, really difficult. And one of the things I say to individuals when they may say to me, Delroy, I shouldn't feel like this, I ask them, do you know what a tsunami is? Yes, what happens with a tsunami? And they talk about the devastation. And one of the things I say to individuals, if you've lost a loved one through suicide, what you've experienced is a tsunami that has affected your entire being, your psychological well-being, your emotional well-being. It will affect your physiology, your hormones, the endocrine system. It has affected your entire body. And as you know, when a tsunami hits the land, Nothing in its path survives. So when somebody experiences a suicide, basically that's what's happened. There's been a tsunami in their lives. So what are the things that we can do to help individuals during this difficult time? One of the things that you can do is just sit with them. I think I said last week, do not underestimate the importance of your presence. Not present as in P-R-E-S-E-N-T-S, but P-R-E-S-E-N-C-E, your presence, your body being with them at the particular time. And one of the things I'd also say, resist the urge to fix. In fact, look, I'm going to be honest, when somebody's taken their own life, the impact on the family, you can't take that away. There's nothing you can do to fix it. So one of the things I'll say quite right from the outset, you can't take it away. No matter what words you say, what words you use, or whatever you think you can do, it will not take away the impact of what's taken place in their lives and the family. But your presence can do something to help them get through the day. So acknowledge the situation. So, for example, I hear that so-and-so has taken life by suicide. What that does, it enables conversation. Because what happens quite often, sometimes we're quite fearful of upsetting the individual, but quite often people want to talk about it, not unless they say, look, I really don't want to talk about it at the moment. So, as I've said, you have two ears, use them. Do not underestimate the therapeutic power of listening. Have you ever been in a situation whereby you've listened to somebody and you've said nothing, and when they're finished, they say, thank you very much for everything. You've not done anything. All you've done is listened. You might have said a few prompts to tell me a little bit more. You've not been into a conversation, but you've allowed them, you've given them the space to talk. That's the very thing you can do. Listen really well and talk even less. One of the things you can do with individuals that have taken, of families or friends whose loved one has taken their own life, you can say this to them: I'm here when you need me, but don't say, if you need me, call me. I'm here when you need me, but don't wait for them to contact you. Reach out to them, and then you say to them, what is it you would like me to do? They may not want you to do anything, but you ask the question, what is it you would like me to do for you? And it could be make a cuppa, do the shopping, babysitting, can you do some cooking? Can you clean the house for me? Can you help me clean the house? Anything that's practical that can help people, ask the question, how can I help you? Don't wait for them to contact you, because more likely than not, they will never ever contact you. But you reach out to them, even if what you're offering at the moment is not right for them, at least reach out to them. Keep reaching out to people. Grief is problematic in the sense that it's a roller coaster. Coupled with suicide, it is even more complex and difficult. And what the death does, like as explained with the tsunami, it leaves people disorientated. They're all over the place, and sometimes they don't even know how to think or feel. And sometimes if you ask people, what are you feeling? They might say to you, I don't know. It's all over the place, and that's exactly okay. And if they're feeling all over the place, 1 minute emotions up here, 1 minute down there, let them know they are responding normally to an abnormal situation. Sometimes when people are experiencing grief, or certainly with suicide, one of the things that they may fear, because the emotions are so intense and so unusual, some of them may actually feel as if they're going mad. So what you'd say to them, and you don't need to be a counsellor to know this, but you say to them, whatever you're feeling, even though you might not be able to explain it, you can't even put it into words, it's up and down, you can't even control it, you are responding normally to an abnormal situation. Some of the things to avoid, and this is number one thing that you must avoid if you can at all costs. When you see a friend or a family who's lost a loved one through suicide, Do not cross the road. Do not duck into a shop. Don't avoid them. Don't avert your gaze. Because what happens quite often when people have lost a loved one, they feel isolated anyway. And if they see you crossing the road, and it happens so often, quite often is that you don't know what to say. But I say to the individual, listen, if you don't know what to say, you say to your friend, look, I can't imagine what you must be feeling. I really don't know what to say, but I'm here for you. You don't need to have all the answers. Listen, after over 3 decades of working with people, do you think I have all the answers? I don't. Sometimes I am left winded by what's has happened to individuals. I can't, I'm trying to get a sense of it all. But what I do know, that my very presence helps them through that difficult time. And sometimes, and I'll just say this as a counsellor, and I can share this with you, sometimes when somebody shares with you how they are feeling so disorientated, so all over the place, uncontrollable, and it's kind of zapped you, sometimes you might be feeling what they're feeling. So in a sense, there can be some form of identification of emotions, and sometimes that's how we feel powerless and so forth. Other things to avoid. I know how you feel. No, you don't. Even if you've lost someone through suicide, everybody's situation is different. So I know exactly what I know exactly how you feel. No, you don't. I know exactly what I totally understand. No, you don't. You really don't. We don't, because they're sitting in their skin, in their shoes, having to deal with it all. So those things are really kind of helpful to avoid. Other things to avoid as well, certainly for religious people, and I know this quite well, the person's in a better place now. That is not always helpful. That may be true or not, it depends on where you are on the kind of spiritual or religious scale, but actually when somebody has lost a loved one through suicide, and certainly, as I mentioned last week, some of the churches have made some, over the years, and even now, make some horrible claims about people who have taken their own lives. So actually saying to an individual, they're in a better place now, might not be helpful. So it might be on those occasions to keep your religious or spiritual views to yourself, even if the person you're with is also a believer or spiritual like you. So avoid that as best as you can. Other thing to avoid is something like this. It almost sounds kind of crass. Look, that's happened, it's beyond you now, get on with your life. Really? I don't think so. Talking to a friend on Saturday, met up with her son, took his own life 7 years ago. In fact, it was round about the anniversary. And there's a particular thing that she said at the time, not understanding what was happening. She said, you know, Delroy, even though people might say certain things, it doesn't take it away. So this whole thing about, look, it's behind you now, you can get on with your life. No. It takes a long time. In fact, the truth be known, you never get over it. You never get over grief. What you do, you grow around it. That's what happens. You grow around grief. That's really important. The things to avoid, because what it can do, it can really get people angry while they're in a very vulnerable state. I'd just like to leave some ideas about the process of dealing with grief. It's something I've used before. Before I say that, certainly one of the things to avoid is advice giving. If I were you, or I should, or you need to, they don't need to do anything. They don't should do anything. And if I were you, nothing. You're not them. So that advice giving is not helpful during that particular time. It's not helpful at all. Just want to look at some kind of process of dealing with loss and grief. One of the things I want to say right off the bat, if you don't remember anything from this session, is simply this. Grief is universal, but deeply personal. Grief is universal, but deeply personal. And I want us to kind of remember that there's no right way to grieve. In fact, there's not even a handbook written on how to grieve, because there isn't one, because it's different. I think it was Honor Blackman who had lost somebody. Anna Blackman, for those who are really young, was a British actress, and I think somebody died. Somebody very close to her died, and she said, "Nobody or nothing prepares you for the landscape of grief." Yes, I think it's Honor Blackman. That's what I think. Honor Blackman. She said, "Nobody or nothing prepares you for the landscape of grief. It's undulated. It's not smooth. It's got valleys and maybe some high points for a while, but the land at times can be rough and so forth." So the whole thing about grief is really individual and personalised. One of the things that you can do to help individuals during this time is give them the permission to feel. One of the things that we do, certainly in British culture, very stoic, it's kind of a stiff upper lip, that when we've experienced something so painful, the thing that we want to do quite often is to sit on it or dumb it down. But actually, if we do that, it leads to massive complications later on. So what we need to do is to help people, give them the permission to feel. And when they talk about their emotions, we don't judge, we don't condemn, we don't put them to one side, we don't make them feel small, but give them the permission to feel. That's really important. One of the things that you can do, for some people it works, you can either ask people or help to journal or talk about the positive memories. One of the things in positive psychology, it talks about savouring. And savouring is about, during difficult times, are there pockets of good experiences that we've had we can remember that can really help us just to kind of get through the difficult time. So there's three types of savouring. There's savouring from the past, which is kind of what we're looking at now, is are there memories of the person who took their life, fond memories, loving memories, funny memories? Are there memories that you can just savour, that you can it just reminds you of the good times that you had together while this person was alive, the memorable times, the funny times, the times that you both laughed together. Those can be really, really helpful in kind of just easing the process a bit. Now, three types of savouring. There's past, there's present, and there's future. And maybe for the person who's lost a loved one through suicide, the present is difficult enough, and the future, they may see no thought of the future in the early stages. But sometimes they can go back to the past and really kind of reminisce about some of the good stuff that went on in the person's life. One of the things that I've found that some people have found really, really helpful, and there's a bit of debate about this, when somebody has lost a loved one, I don't advocate counselling straight away. Give it 6, 7, 8, 9 months, just for them to kind of just settle a little bit. When somebody's lost their life through suicide, emotions are incredibly raw, and trying to get a sense of where people are is almost impossible. So give them some space. Certainly in terms of counselling, certainly as a friend, checking on them really regularly, and then when they're ready to go for professional support, maybe 6 months, and after, kind of just be with them during that time. One of the things that can be helpful as well, it seems kind of odd, that when people are going through grief, one of the things that can be helpful is if they help other people who are going through some stuff. Because what it does, it takes their mind off things and it causes them to focus on somebody else who has needs. I think one of the things I hear so often, I think I've heard it so often in over 30 years, you can imagine, well, Delroy, I know this has happened to me, but there's people far worse off than me. And I always say, yes, that is absolutely correct. But what you're going through right now, how is that affecting you? So, and that's what I'm really interested in. So when people are going through their own stuff, what can be really helpful is if they help other people, maybe not necessarily through death, but they can be helping people do other things. And what I would say, that the process of getting to a place where people feel a sense of balance, they never can go back to normal because this event has just been too huge. So there's no way they can get back to normal. But there can be a new existence but the process takes a long time, and you have to let people know that this takes a long time. But also, one of the things in terms of helping people through the process of grief is to be mindful of recurring grief. Years afterwards, something can happen, a trigger can happen, and the person can just burst into tears, go into a deep mood, be very, very sullen, even 10, 15, 20 years after the event. So it's just letting people know that even though the event has happened, and it could have happened a long time ago, people can still be struggling with the effects of the suicide. So what individuals want is they want to be listened to, they don't want to be judged or condemned, and they need to tell their story as often as possible. That's really important. This whole thing about being cathartic, expressing, sharing the story of where they are. And if you feel as a friend that they may be getting stuck and it just kind of keeps going around in a circle and this is going on for quite some time, it may be time then to kind of make the referral. Have you thought about seeing a bereavement counsellor or a grief counsellor, or getting some further help? So what you're trying to do as a friend is to provide a safe and supportive environment so this person feels safe to talk. One of the tragedies about suicide is the impact it has on the surviving members of the family, the guilt, the shame. What did we miss? Could we have not done more? And those feelings you just can't get them out of people. And so it's about not being able to fix, but it's being there to hear the story repeatedly and so forth, and provide that space so they can express grief in their own way. And of course, you can imagine there's no time limits. You can't put a time limit on this. I hear it all the time when things happen to people, and quite often actually, if you hear comments like, "Have you not got over that yet?" or something of that matter, it really lets you know they've not experienced anything like it, because if they had, they would know the pain of it. And quite often what we're dealing with, grief, as I said before, is problematic. Grief caused by somebody who's taken their own life is even more complex. You can't take away the pain, you can't, but your presence there can be soothing, And even if you sit with them, let me talk about this. You sit with them to watch a movie, or you might want to go to the pictures with them. And even if it means that you sit in silence. I recall many years ago, this wasn't suicide, but it was a mother she had to have abortion in the end. The baby had died inside of her. And I don't know what had happened, but some major stuff had gone on the internal organs of the baby. And I remember going to the home, and the home was pretty much darkness. The TV was on, and I think I sat with a couple. The TV was on very low. I think I sat with a couple 2 hours, maybe even longer, in pure silence. They made me a drink when I came, and I sat with them in silence and didn't say anything until they were willing to speak. So that's something that you may have to do. You might, don't be kind of twiddling your thumbs and thinking when they're going to start. Just your presence there can be incredibly effective. So don't underestimate, and give it time. Be patient with them. They've had a tsunami in their lives, so give them that patience and support. So sit with them, watch TV in silence with them, go for walks with them necessarily. Don't be afraid to mention the person's name. And in fact, even during those really grim days, and you mention the person's name and it goes into kind of reminiscing, individuals can savor the past. They can still have moments of laughter even during those really dark days when people are kind of coming to terms with what has happened to them. Because what happens if you talk about the person, if you call the person's name and you mention them and you start reminiscing, what it does, it gives people the opportunity to talk, because that's what needs to happen for most people. They want to talk, not to bottle it up. The bottling up causes a lot of difficulties, and certainly in cultures whereby they don't talk about deaths and so forth. Again, I've met so many adults in their 40s who were told they couldn't go to the funeral. This is kind of different, but in terms of suicide, but in terms of grief, allowing people to talk, allowing people to witness what goes on, that's all a part of the grieving process. One of the things I'd just like to add, I'll be finishing in a few moments, but one of the things I'd like to add, part of the grief process is people can have dreams, and they can dream about the person who has taken their own life. And sometimes the dreams they're not sad dreams, they're happy dreams. That's a part of the kind of healing process. Now, of course, if the dreams are recurring, they're disturbing and nightmares, well, and they keep carrying on, that's a job then to see a professional to see actually what's going on. But certainly in my line of work, recurring dreams, nightmares, usually to do with unfinished business, unresolved issues. But then in the case of somebody losing a loved one through suicide, it could be something else, and that's the time if they're recurring and nightmares, it might be the time to see a psychologist or a counsellor or psychotherapist to help them kind of work through whatever they might be working through. The other thing I'll say, and I'm going to end on this, it's really important, make sure you look after yourself. Believe you me, even as a professional, working with somebody who's taken a family or a friend who's lost a loved one through suicide is not easy. It's hard work, it's demanding. And if you're a friend but you're not skilled as a mental health worker or a counsellor or psychotherapist, you may feel as if you're out of your depth. And there's no harm saying, well, whoa, listen, I can listen, but actually I think I may need to refer you that, the support and the help that you need really needs to come from a professional. But certainly don't neglect yourself in the process. As you're listening to the stories repeatedly, you too might need some support as you maybe listen to how the loss of the loved one through suicide has impacted on your friend, and they're telling you the story that might impact on you. Worse still, if the person who took their life, you knew them as well. That's even difficult, and it may be, obviously your friend might know them really, really well, and you may not know them as well, so you have to kind of measure up and think to yourself, can I support my friend well enough, or would I need to make the referral as soon as possible? After the end of this session, I'm going to leave some links that you can kind of go down, and if you need the support, it's there for you. But I want to thank you very much indeed for taking the time to listen. Certainly comment between now and next week. Next week, it will be the final session, will be what to do if you feel suicidal. And those of us do. There are times in our lives that people have felt suicidal, and the feelings have become overwhelming. And so what do you do in those circumstances? Next week, we'll be looking at some of the things that you can do to help you if you yourself feel suicidal, what you can do to prevent you taking your own life. So let me just check that there's nobody put any comments in at the moment. I'll just go down for a sec. I don't think they have actually. No, maybe everybody's watching football. That might be the thing. Anyway, I wish you well, and I'll see you next week at 7 o'clock for the final part of United Against Suicide. Enjoy the rest of your evening and your week. Take care. All the best. Bye-bye.